Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So this video is about why I'm 100% against every nation in the world. And I'm going to use the Nigerian Civil War and what led up to it as a point of reference. Because my father's from Nigeria, my mother's family's from America, and before that Europe, what have you. So in 1914, we see that a person named Sir Frederick Lugard made the borders and the regions of Nigeria, whether he sees it that way or not, right? So by making the borders of Nigeria, he had made the regions. There was a bunch of tribes there, and there's 3 huge tribes, and there's a bunch of small tribes there, which together make up quite a few people. And the nation, again, was made up by somebody named Sir Frederick Lugard. He just made it up. Just like your tribes and your people. Someone came around and say, hey, I'm going to call this X, Y, and Z because of your mere human rules, customs, and traditions. So if you look at things in terms of the Abrahamic faiths, it is completely fair for me to be against every nation in the world. You look at things in terms of logic and what people did to me and how their peoples did not stand with me, how they chose to stand for their nations and their tribes and their groups and their races and their political groups, what have you, instead of standing for moral precision, which requires obeying God through me. It's more than fair for me to be against them. So if you think that I shouldn't be against them or that I shouldn't be allowed to say this, please make your case. You people are in the doghouse. And after my flesh dies, people will be cut off from heaven. Now say you live in Somalia, or no, let's not use Somalia, we'll say you live in South Africa, and you're a poor black person. And you're like, well, why is that fair to me? Right? How is that fair to me? Well, let's go and assume that 90% plus of the black people in South Africa, like people on this planet, right, easily 90% plus for the population to keep increasing, right, are going to reproduce. Let's assume the person complaining has no plan to not have any children. They have a plan to have children. So you're going to say to me why it's fair for you to be cut off from God and your offspring when you plan to have offspring like your parents. You looked at the world. You saw it's an evil world run by the evil colonist who swears up and down that he's the good guy and that the people he oppresses are the evil ones. Okay. Your parents decide to have you, and you're deciding to have children too. You see technologies of control, psychology, propaganda. You see the world getting worse. You see their psychology improving. You see psyops everywhere, and you're going to have a child to be the plaything of the world that they're forming and the sick fucks who run that world and who run the world, you know, in that secular kind of powerless beta frat boy way right now. That's retarded, right? Then you're going to then turn around and say that perhaps you've been treated unfairly by God and I. How the hell is that treating you unfairly? Life is a test. You failed. Your parents failed. They decided to have a dumbass who doesn't understand why it's fair for his evil behind to be cut off permanently. Him and his offspring. You don't understand that. You don't even understand that, but you would say you're being treated unfairly. And you probably want grandkids and great-grandkids as well. And you're probably a sick bastard that wants to live to see your great-grandkids in this evil world after forging your kids and your grandkids to be evil. To do what it takes to assimilate. So now back to the Nigerian Civil War. One of the white man's biggest failures, one of the Jews' biggest failures, one of the LGBT community's biggest failures. The word Lugard is a play on words for draw, Jew-el. It's like Biafra, the nation they would eventually form it to fight against the Nigerian government in the Civil War, is a play on words for your fee Obi. Obi meaning King Heart Hut Essence Center Temple Core. And so you see a bunch of frat boys led the charge when it came to the military coup on behalf of the southern region in Nigeria, on behalf of the Igbos. Some Yorubas teamed up with them. we'll touch on that briefly here. I'm not going to get too much into detail here. Nobody's the expert on the Nigerian Civil War, even the people who were there, even the officers who were there, because there was too much going on, too much secret society stuff going on, too much misinformation. Even the white people giving the orders, to a large degree, behind the scenes, they didn't quite understand everything. They don't understand every tribe there, why they did what they did. They just kind of do psychology. They know it works to some degree, and they just push forward. So nobody knows. People like to hear themselves talk. They like to pretend that, how much research they've done makes them the expert and that they know, and they say things that, you don't know what you're talking about, and there's some idiot, some arrogant Freemason or some, they like to pretend that they're the masters of information and that they know best about everything. They're very dumb for that. What did this one person say? He said, that the smart person knows how much he doesn't know, or something like this, right? So looking at things in terms of knowledge of a topic or knowledge of these worldly things in general, instead of moral worth, is retarded. Martin Luther King Jr. himself had a PhD. And obviously he's beneath me. I'm the son of God, but he had a PhD. And he didn't go on and on about how he judges people by their education. He said the content of their character. Pretty straightforward. One of the reasons why I hate the nations is full of Freemasons and scientists and these arrogant people with their fancy degrees, and they don't have a speck of moral worth, and they put their nose up at people. It's very sickening. That's why martial arts are better than science in its true form. Martial arts is about building character. Science is about just being polluted by the world and learning scientific things. It's being another geek. Okay. Now, scientists have been helpful over the years in various ways, and they've been extremely unhelpful. The world ended basically because of science. That's why in the Bible it says Apollyon, the destroyer, is this very significant demon who's the angel of the abyss. That puts into perspective. And Apollyon is like Apollo, the Greek deity of science and knowledge, and Luciferian light, and so on and so forth. Okay. There's also Athena, right, where all that pederasty and stuff kind of is. They claim that it was mainly centered around Athens. I don't know. Okay, and if I did know, I wouldn't put my nose up at people saying, "Hey, I know and you don't know." Okay. So, as we look at things that occur, there's one guy named Herbert, right? His name was Herbert, okay, and he looked like a Freemason or something, and he was said to lead, the anti-colonial movement initially in the 1920s, and he had the dominant Nigerian political party at the time, which leads to the Clifford Constitution in 1923, and they give him a little bit more rights. In the 1930s, there's a youth movement, right? It replaces his movement, the One Nigeria movement, which would also be cited during the Nigerian Civil War, right? One Nigeria. Okay. And obviously, there was a bunch of Freemasons and so on manipulating that. There was a series of constitutions that gave him a little bit more rights, right? The Richardson Constitution, McPherson, the Littleton. They were all, basically the white man behind the scenes, the international financiers, Jewish and otherwise, the LGBT frats, right? The Freemasons, the college frats, right? The Club of Rome, the Club of Pederasty, I call it, but I have no information proven definitively that they do those things. But the evidence suggests that they're very much part and parcel. They basically say, hey, so you're doing things our way. Well, we'll give you the Richardson Constitution. Oh, you're doing things our way some more. Well, the McPherson. Oh, a little bit more, the Littleton, right? The Little Tone. And there's a bunch of little Jews, who, if they were to call me racial names, I'd say, well, you're a racist pipsqueak. And not all Jews are little, mind you. So it's not a racial insult. Who put things like that in there? Littleton, right? The Richardson, right? As if you worship Richard's son and pretend that the Son of God is magically the damn English, okay? The Da Vinci Code rubbish. And you say, well, it's Richard's son. King Richard from it's stupid. It is so stupid. You got the English crowd, you got the Jews, and of course, Nigeria was part of the Anglosphere, and they got their quote-unquote independence from the English, right? The British. The British! Okay. So basically, initially, the people on the West, right, which were, the Yorubas are a mix of Muslims in the Northwest and more Christians in the Southwest. And the Igbos are in the Southeast. and they're basically, well, the Yorubas also, they have their indigenous religions as well, right? And the Igbos were, Christians, Catholics, and they have their indigenous religions. And so they initially had an alliance, trying to win the 1964 election, for example. And that went south. They couldn't agree on tactics. They couldn't agree on splitting power, what have you. So the Igbos initially tried to form an alliance with the House of Fulani political group, dominant political group in the north. That went south. So then they realigned themselves to the dominant political party in the west with the Yorubas, and another party emerges in the west that is under the Muslim House of Fulani in the north, right? They're basically, back these guys. And if you read between the lines, the English were jealous of the Igbos because they knew that that's where the Son of God comes from, the Igbo tribe. And so they actually backed the Muslims during this political process, them and their other allies, right? Freemasons is a global group. There's a bunch of white supremacists everywhere. They did not want Martin Luther King's tribe, the Igbos, right? He's mostly like an Igbo. That's where I get that argument. He's Martin Luther King's tribe looks like the spitting image of my uncle who passed away. Okay, give or take, very similar rather. And they didn't want them to shine. And when Martin Luther King was killed in 1968, it was during the Nigerian Civil War, which took place from 1967 to 1970. When Malcolm X was killed in 1965, it was a year after the 1964 election that would lead to the Nigerian Civil War, that the Muslims had won that election. And what had happened was the Igbos and the Yorubas, who weren't being propped up by the Muslims in the north, right, because they had two parties. The Igbo had the NC. Well, these party names don't matter. And they had rigged the census trying to win, as the story goes. So they added people, to their numbers, according to the documentary I've seen. And I've seen, I've read a book about it. I've seen several documentaries, what have you. And they said, that they're going to add 70% to their populations, another 70%, which would give them the majority vote, would give them more seats in the government, whatever would give them, would help them win the election, what have you, right? So they're trying to rig the census to give themselves more political power in a nutshell. The details aren't so important here. Now, that caused the Muslims in the north to then rig the census in their favor, and when the smoke cleared, they won the election. Okay, now keep in mind again, these nations are formed basically by the West, right? They went around, they made the boundaries of India, they made the boundaries of Nigeria, you name it, right? There's Italians there, there's French, there's English, there's various nations there, right? There's the Belgians, right, in Congo, and on and on and on, right? So they're forging Africa a certain way, and they're manipulating the politics after they're given some semblance of independence. Then when they're finally given independence, right, it's their general form. Sometimes it's just the independence right away. They're very much in their pocket. Thus the term, the comprador elite. Now I'm going way over time here. The point is that the resulting slaughter wasn't a lack of governance per se, right, in terms of African governance. It was poor Western governance, and they had money and power and weapons, just like we see all over Africa at the time, right? You see in the Algerian War, you see with the Angolans, okay, and South Africa. There's Rhodesia in terms of the Zimbabwe, okay. We see all over Africa that pattern, right? In Ethiopia, right? There's CIA versus the Soviets, and sometimes the Soviets win, sometimes the CIA wins, and that's just part of the game that they're playing. They want to make it seem like there's this intense competition and that's what people should be, focusing on and what have you. There's some kind of Freemasonic ruse. The Freemasons are a very good example of a group that manipulates things, pretends to be civilized, pretends to have it together, sabotages other groups, and then says, hey, look to us in the game that we're playing. So they're playing this game of death, so to speak, this game of political insanity. And they're very much concerned with science and philosophy. Just Google it, right? Google Freemasons and philosophy. Google the scientific lodges of Freemason. You'll see that I'm right. There's no other way that could be. They're very much involved in these things, clearly. Look at how many presidents, right? Washington and Roosevelt and Truman and on and on and on. And Lord knows how many guys were Freemasons that, that history doesn't acknowledge as Freemasons, when it comes to these presidents. So we see this kind of Luciferian Masonic manipulation. And there's other groups like the Club of Rome. I bring them up all the time. The Odd Fellows. Back in the day, the Knights of Malta, the Ku Klux Klan. Okay, even the damn Rotary Club and the Kiwanis Club, they're in on it. I mean, it's ridiculous how things work. Very evil. And so let's fast forward to America. So my dad comes here in 1967 when the Nigerian Civil War breaks out. He's kind of behind the enemy lines. He makes his way, from what I'm told, he makes his way to America. The CIA bring him here, something to that effect, right? And they try to control my family, and they try to feel empowered. They think that if, they wave their magic wand and try to tell Jesus' family and Jesus what to do, that they magically have power. And the whole world is like, hey, we're not supposed to do this, acting like an 18-year-old girl or a 20-year-old female, right, who lives at her parents' house, saying her dad said she's not allowed to date a black guy or something. It's not respectable. It's like, yes, go against them, you fucking idiot. But they don't get that. It's the old bridge. If everyone's jumping off a bridge for no reason, key phrase, for no reason, would you do the same? If everyone is going to hell, acting like a bitch, serving pedos and their allies, and they're persecuting Jesus, so they're, one who's slacking his work, his brother, the one who destroys, right? They're slacking their work. That which they did not do for the least of my brethren, they didn't do for me, but more specifically, that which they didn't do for me, they didn't do for me. Okay? You don't join them, you rally to Jesus. They don't understand this. So as we look at the Nigerian Civil War example, we could be talking about Rhodesia, we could be talking about America, we could be talking about India, we could be talking about, you name it, the history of Australia. It never fails. Your Luciferian colonial mentality ruined the world with no way back. As soon as you made it so it was not logical for me to have children, I couldn't then say, hey, well, it's not logical for me to have children on the same evil planet that no one should have children, that you magically should. No. You had ended the world because everyone with even a speck of sense or better would rather die than have children. Every woman on this planet, for example, if she got pregnant by being raped or something, she'd get an abortion, she'd kill herself. She wouldn't bring a child into this very sick and evil and ruthless and cold-hearted planet where they persecute the most righteous person that ever lived. That's crazy. After they screened out so many people, and they're starving people to death. 9 million people a year. What kind of monster wants to derive pleasure from a system that starves 9 million people to death every year, including 3 million children? And there's so many others. Drug overdoses, suicides, deportations. Just ruthless, ruthless, ruthless. You should see the Miller speech the other day at the Charlie Kirk Memorial. A very sick speech. Very Luciferian. Where he pretends to be a Christian and he talks about how, he thinks he's the good guy and everyone who opposes him is evil. Very sick people. Very deranged. Both parties are led by lunatics. Just like in the Nigerian Civil War, the political parties they had there, right? The MPC, the Action Group, the NCNC, they were led by lunatics behind the scenes. Imperialists, psychopaths, you name it. These people also tell communists what to do. And they're white, Jewish, and LGBT rich people and whoever else is wrong with them. It's pretty straightforward. So why? You should pause the video in a second here after you think about this question here. Why on earth shouldn't I despise every nation in the world and everyone who refuses to reproduce and everyone who cheats me out of my right to lead? Now, some people don't know I'm here, and that will be considered when their souls are being judged. Why should I despise them? Why should I despise the community, Santa Clara County in California? Or when I used to get on Tinder and Plenty of Fish and Facebook, when they'd shun me, when my messages did go through, they'd shun me. They see the most righteous guy that ever lived, dressed as the most handsome martial artist ever in my picture back then. They edited the pictures instead. Made him look fairy-like, cartoonish, put red on the lips, things like that. Okay? Maybe not all my pictures, but all my pictures are significantly reduced. They saw God's Son in his glory, sending him a message saying, hey, I want to get to know you. And they're like, who are you? Do I know you? When Christ comes, or an angel, in his glory, Is the answer to say, well, I don't know, you like a dumb fucking chicken head bitch? Or is the answer to say, hey, to what do I owe this pleasure, or something to that effect? They were not honored to receive me. And this isn't about a fucking bitch. This is about God's plan and a bunch of fucking worms that break into groups of bitches that reject it. Any questions? So you gotta realize that I'm a very fair and righteous person. I can tell you with 100% certainty, the principles of evil are leading other people astray. The scripture on the screen is correct, and the pictures on the screen show a lot of what is going on. People are in some kind of satanic spirit. There's satanic kind of pagan spirits, and there's satanic sort of Jewish spirits, right? Baalists. When they worship Yah, it's not as the one true God. It's not the same thing. Because how they're actually using the word refers to the moon. A moon deity, specifically one that has to do with lunacy, right? Lunar cycles, la lune, the moon. Lunatics. They want you to look up to people like Tesla, etc. Can you imagine if all those action movies you saw were really about nerds? Would that make sense to you? Anyway, Geek Seagal instead of Steven Seagal. Now these guys, keep in mind, they're false idols. Okay, they follow, the governing class. They're allowed by them for various reasons. But there's a reason why they superimpose these guys on the idea of martial art heroes. Because nerds are just nerds. And arrogant people in suits and so-called European royals, they're just feudal lords, the offspring of feudal lords. They're just oppressors. And anyone who doesn't understand that is very stupid. These people should have given me my rightful place. If they couldn't do that, they should have worked around me and compensated me. Now I'm 44. I've been shunned my whole life. I've only had 2.5 years of relationships all put together. So if you started to started at 14, for example, that's 30 years and 2.5 years of relationships put together, including ones I had before, what little I had before I was 18. That's how stupid people are on this planet. The devil is like the center of the spirit of folly and sheer stupidity. Even an agnostic person must know, when they look at religion, they must know that it is stupid to persecute the most righteous person that ever lived because he obeys God, whether you believe in God or not. It's stupid to cause me to slip on my words and to say stupid frat stuff, stupid political party stuff, stupid military psyop stuff. That's retarded. You're supposed to be a grown man, not some kind of hazing bitch. It's stupid to say, well, since he said that, we're going to have to get even. Grow the fuck up. When your dad used to spank you when you were younger, did you think you have to get even? I mean, grow the fuck up. How much more when God's son chastises you?